All right, we're live and ready to go. Welcome everybody to the Examining Coaching and Coach Education in the United States. I'm really excited to have everybody here and have all of our speakers and to be doing this first ever live stream event talking about coaching and coach education in the United States. My name is Kristen Diefenbach. I am an associate professor at West Virginia University in the Center for Applied Coaching and Sports Studies. And this is an event that is sponsored by the WVU Provost Office and by the United States Center for Coaching Excellence. So I'll kick off, and then we have an exciting list of speakers for you today. So as we all know, sport is a major thing in the United States. It's a passion, it's a hometown hero thing. It is a really big deal. And we also know that the youth sport culture in the United States is often thought of as sort of the bedrock, right? It's a rite of passage, it's part of our communities, it's part of our social life, and something that people hold near and dear, from the soccer moms to every dad coaches their kids kind of culture and mentality. Unfortunately, we also know that there's some clear evidence that suggests that sport experience is not always positive, that we have some issues and some challenges on small scales to large scales. We know that kids leave sport at the ages of 13 and 14 in droves. We know that there's a growing obesity epidemic with lack of physical activity. You talk to coaches and you talk to sports scientists, we know that kids don't have the skills they used to have as they come up through the sport ranks and as they even get into higher levels of sport if they stay in. And then, of course, we also know that there are even bigger challenges and even bigger concerns that have to do with the safety and well-being of our children and our young people who participate in sports. We also, in the United States, look up to our coaches. We have numerous books, biographies, movies, all those different things touting the great iconic coaches that we all look up to, the people that drive how we think about coaching in general. They make it into the business place. They make it into just our common collective culture. And we know that coaches matter. There is a good amount of research that tells us that they can have a pretty potentially big impact on young people and folks in sport. And we know that that can either be positive or negative depending on how that coach acts with the things that they do. We know that they can have a huge impact on self-esteem, motivation, their enjoyment, whether or not they stay in sport over a lifetime, and their healthy lifelong habits. We also know the coach is someone who can help with all the things outside of sport as well if they're working with that athlete. In general, the coach is typically a stereotype, right? We have the coach who is often male. We have the coach who is doing it because they played sport, because they're the one that's available, all kinds of reasons that we stereotype our coaches, but very often it's a stereotype. We have very high expectations for coaches. We expect them to do all of those great things, making sure that kids are physically active, physically fit, getting their positive youth development, making sure they're developing great skills, all of these awesome things. And yet, we have relatively low standards when we take a look at how we think about our coaches. You played, you get to coach. You win, you get to stay, even if we don't see some of the other metrics that we have the high expectations for. We often have minimal training, and we worry about that volunteer army that we want to make sure we don't turn them away because they're volunteers, and we've got to be careful with them. And we tend to take a one-size-fits-all. Whether you're coaching at the collegiate level or you're coaching at the youth sport level, a coach is a coach is a coach. And so again, those high expectations and low standards have been a traditional concern. Another thing we want to note is that the recognition of the coach as a performer. When we start to look at the growing body of literature around coaching, and we start looking at the discipline of sport coaching education and sport coach development, we see really nice documentation about the increase in responsibilities and expectations, which increase the high pressure environment, even at our youth levels, all the way up through the elite and professional levels, with high levels of burnout, high levels of stress, concerns about well-being and ill-being, life under a microscope, and all of those kinds of concerns. So how do we take it from coach, what I call little c coach, to capital C coach? From thinking about being just that corner coach, the lower expectations where we have been traditionally, to this capital C coach, where we really are thinking about the professionalization of coaching. Looking at that growth and demand for professionalization that's coming from a society that's asking for greater accountability, that's coming from practitioners and educators who are saying that if we want people to get out of sport the things that we know sport can deliver, then we need to prepare the people better who are responsible for helping make that happen. And how do we recognize the criteria of the professional as it applies to coaching? We also need to recognize that complexity and skill that it requires to teach and lead in the sport environment. This quote goes back a while to 1989, but looking at what Con and Razor said, we have a legal and moral responsibility to provide qualified individuals to coach young people. And I'll extend that to we have a legal and moral responsibility to provide qualified individuals to coach all people, that the sport experience is that important and that powerful in people's lives. And so one of the things I'd like you to think about today is the volunteer, there we go, the volunteer fire department model, in the idea that when someone wants to fight fires, they have to have the skills necessary to do that job adequately. They need to be well prepared in that environment because of the safety concerns of everybody involved. In that environment with volunteer firemen, you don't get to be a fireman just because you want to or just because you know how to light the fire, right? You need to have the skills that are required for the job. And I think when we start to talk about how important the coach is and how important we are saying sport is, that we need to stop for a moment and really rethink how important the training and preparation and the expectations and the standards are within the coaching world. So one of the things that we've done here at WVU in our lab is we've taken a look, and this is just a small representation of the over 3,000 sport organizations, vast majority of which are nonprofit, that work in the United States and in some way, shape, or form are associated with coaching. Some very directly, like the almost 700 that we've cataloged that are some sort of coaching organization for coaches themselves, to all of the national governing bodies, the NFHS state-by-state organizations that run the different state organizations, as well as the many, many, many nonprofits across all of this. So let that sink in. That's only about 350, 400 little icons up there. There's over 3,000 that we have in the database so far. And what we don't know is what are the best practices in coaching? What does the research support in coaching? What should the standards be? And who should provide the guidance? Who among these 3,000 are in charge? Because within the United States system, we don't have one single centralized organization that oversees all of this. And so how do we start to work together? How do we start to talk about these things? One thing I also want to note is we do have some amazing research and amazing documents that have been put together all over the United States by different organizations. These are just a few. The National Youth Sports Strategy is one that we'll take a look at today. But we have some beginnings of some of these things that we need to start to look at collectively and think about how do they come together, where do they overlap, and how do they inform the preparation and the organization with our sport coaches. So for today, what our goal is, as we take a look at examining coaching and coach education in the United States, is to begin to look at these crucial questions. And our presenters will be talking about a wide range of topics, looking at some of the essential discussions and essential areas in this conversation, hopefully sparking more conversation and opportunities for collaboration. So as we get started here in just a moment, I wanted to give you a quick look at some of the great presenters who will be leading us off and taking us into today's program.